Welcome to another episode of the Skytale Insights podcast. I'm Annie Robertson Hockey, president of Skytale Group, and I am so honored and thrilled to be here today with Dr. Nicole Rakowski, who is a health and longevity expert and also a professional athlete, something that I'm really excited to dig into later on. But before we dig in, Nicole, would do a disservice to your background. So I would actually love if you could give our listeners a bit of your, what brought you here and your past, because I think you have such a unique background that I think folks will be really excited to learn more about.
I so appreciate that, Annie, and I'm just as excited to be here today. So, just again, giving a little bit of background. So you highlighted it perfectly. So I'm a PhD health and longevity expert, professional athlete when it comes to bodybuilding. I was the New York City's Journal Top 40 Under 40 honoree. I've, given several TED Talks. I'm a muscle and fitness contributor, and I do a lot of work within men's and women's health when it comes to performance, longevity, and education. But really, I think what the unique positioning of my brand is that my work sits at the intersection of fitness, body composition, hormones, peptides, discipline, and a lot of that high performance health, with a particular focus on helping individuals really understand optimization without shame, confusion, or sort of this watered down advice that we're given nowadays. I've been featured on the covers of many major media outlets. More recently, the BBC. I was asked to attend the Enhanced Games as well, more as a consultant type of role, working with muscle and fitness as well. I was on the cover of the internationally recognized Strong magazine and sort of recognized for a lot of my work in the longevity and peptide space. So really excited to be here, and I'm excited to get into some of the meat and bones of this.
Yes, likewise. We were just talking about before we started recording how even your social media presence is just honest and authentic and blunt, and sometimes it's controversial and sometimes you get in trouble, but that's really a piece of your brand, which I love and I so value, and I think this industry could use more of often.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. And yeah, honestly, social media has been booming recently, and it's a way that a lot of individuals are able to share information. And it's really become the intersection of communication around the world, whether some information is just clickbait or using social media influence to get wording across. But it's really boomed in recent years in trying to sort of convey, information that is important for others to hear.
Yeah.
But we sort of talked about how all this sort of came to be for myself, like how am I involved in many different areas? But I think that really they came together through lived experience. That's probably the predominant area.
Yeah. No, I think that shows up in your posting. If you don't follow Nicole, you should. I do, and I've learned a lot.
I appreciate that.
You've worked with, speaking of kind of social media and that presence, you've worked with brands like Muscle and Fitness, Mr. Olympia, Flex, for example. What did those partnerships or that work teach you about really, building trust and credibility versus just attention? Because that's something that we, are asked about and talk with our own Skytale clients with all the time. Like, what is the purpose of your social media? Is it ego? Is it attention? Is it actually building your business? I'd be curious your thoughts there.
I think that's a really great question. I think, depending on what your goals are, like you mentioned, everyone's going to have a different topic, or everyone's going to have a different goal in terms of what they want to perceive to the media, right? Like it's crazy. I'll just give a quick example. When I was at the Enhanced Games, there were hundreds of different social media influencers that were invited to go there. And some of them were famous just from streaming on Twitch. Some of them, it's crazy. You'll see these social influencers, and it's literally like, tune in tomorrow and watch me eat 40 carrot sticks in a row. And they will generate.
I don't want to see that.
Yeah. And they will get 20 million views from it. And it's like, tune in on Wednesday, and I'm going to do the same with celery sticks. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
The number of views, and it's a way to monetize. It's a way to grab people's attention. But to answer your questions, partnerships with platforms like Flex for Muscle and Fitness, Wolfpack, Mr. Olympia, and many other the partnerships I've had with, supplement companies and protein companies, but they've really taught me that, I think attention may introduce you, but it's the credibility that determines whether people stay. So I think social media can make someone visible very quickly. It can be a dramatic transformation. Controversy is what gets people to hook into you, or a strong physique right? It can
Yeah.
generate millions of views. There's been, many of my videos have gone viral where we've gotten, more than 5 million views within a very short period of time.
Wow.
And some of it is the physique. Some of it is the actual, the dry humor that comes into a lot of it. But views alone do not mean that people actually trust you. And
Right.
they certainly do not mean that they will change their behavior because of you. So
Totally.
that's something that I've really learned. And I think working with established media brands showed me that credibility is built through consistency.
Mm.
So you have to be, accurate, responsible, and willing to say that the evidence is not actually clear. This may work for one person,
Right.
but it is not appropriate for everyone. In healthcare and fitness, that restraint really matters because sometimes the most credible thing you can say is less exciting than the most viral thing you can say, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally, totally. And I imagine your health background and your scientific background lends itself to that too, because you are more aware of the actual science behind a lot of these products. So, at a certain point, it can feel like irresponsible to push something that would certainly not apply to everyone unless there's a caveat, right? Which is
Exactly.
always appropriate.
100%. And it's also taught me that, borrowed credibility only takes you so far, right? A
Yeah.
lot of people, what they do on Instagram that works very well is they'll plagiarize viral trends, right? And that's just the sort of nature as social media has taken us. But, something like a respected publication may give you a platform,
Mm.
but then you have to earn the audience's trust yourself. So
Yeah.
people watch how you communicate over time, whether your message changes depending on your sponsor and whether you are genuinely trying to educate them or simply, sell to them. And for me, the purpose of social media is not just to accumulate followers, it is to translate expertise and really build a relationship at scale and to help people make better decisions. I think attention is the entry point, but
Right.
trust is the asset and
Right.
impact is really the real goal that I have at the end of the day.
Right. What I'm hearing and I so value is your why really acutely of exactly why you're doing what you're doing. And I imagine that provides a filter for you of, what are partnerships I will take on, what are partnerships I won't entertain. Like, how do you sort of on a daily basis make sure that you are creating content that is in line with that why, both your partnerships and also your organic content?
That's a great question. And I think, when thinking about my why is transformation. And it's
Mm.
helping people realize that what has happened to them does not necessarily determine, who they become. And so back in 2017, I had this crazy accident in Iceland where my body basically became the site of trauma, but it also became an instrument through which I rebuilt my life.
Yeah.
And I'm honestly not unique to adversity or any challenges. Like every single one of us in this world goes through some sort of crazy experience. And you can't take away from someone's experience. But what really changed for me is that fitness gave me back a sense of strength and control.
Mm.
And then education helped me understand why that transformation was possible. And then medicine gave me a way to help other people through their own difficult moments.
Yeah.
So that is
Yeah.
why I care so deeply about, bridging the science, the health, and media together because there is no shortage of information online, but information alone rarely changes someone.
Yeah.
It's people need that credible guidance, a sense of possibility, and then it's really the practical steps that they can act on. So whether I'm going to a conference or whatever it can be, and I'm speaking about fitness, medicine, longevity, or leadership. The purpose that I have is still the same, and it's to show
Hmm.
people that they are capable of rebuilding, of performing at a higher level, and to becoming more than their circumstances initially predicted.
Yeah. I really love that, and thank you for sharing more about your personal story,
Yeah,
and
no,
how that really guides you. And there's clearly sort of like a mission behind your why, and it's clear. And so I totally understand there's a personal journey there.
yeah.
What do
Thank
you
you.
think? I as a user of social media, we are pushed information about health and longevity and weight loss. I'm starting to get a lot of weight loss, and I'm starting to get offended ads.
Yeah.
How are user like what should users of social media know, or like what would you say to social media users in terms of how to for them also filter what type of content they're taking in?
That's a great question. And I get this question all the time because
Yeah.
you can have one controversial topic and you can have 100 different ways of analyzing, right? So I think that social media is one of the most powerful health education tools we have ever created.
Yeah.
But it's also one of the easiest places to confuse visibility with validity. And that's
Yeah.
something I always tell people. And, so how it works is the algorithm is not really designed to show you the most accurate weight loss advice, like taking that one as an example. It is really designed to show you the content most likely you keep watching. So that often rewards extreme transformations. Let's say there's like absolute claims, if there's fear, controversy, and quick fixes,
Mhm.
lose 20 pounds in 30 days, travels much faster than an honest discussion about sleep or appetite, muscle
Yeah.
retention, medications, hormones, and the fact that sustainable change takes time. And I think one of the biggest things is that users need to understand that a compelling story is not the same as scientific evidence, right? A
Right.
before and
Right.
after photo tells you what appears to have happened, right? Like, again, if we talk about weight loss, an example, but it does not tell you everything that caused it, right? So you may not know whether there was medication surgery, performance enhancing drug use, severe
Right.
restriction, dehydration,
Right.
how much is now AI, right? And we've got these and that's a whole nother podcast I just did on teen boys and peptides, right?
Ugh,
And
I know
you know,
I've been seeing
and
content around it. It's really scary.
right, and they are emulating these guys that they're seeing on social media. But what they're learning like years later is that, oh shit, this person was actually AI created. Right. And I've been
Yeah.
following some of them and emulating that's actually not a real person, right? Or some sort of undisclosed financial incentive behind the content. So
Right.
I always encourage people when I work with those that are in social media and sort of trying to understand what to follow is I get them to ask these four questions. So, who is speaking,
Hmm.
right? What are their qualifications? What it is that they're actually selling? And are they explaining both the benefits and the risks, right? So,
Hmm.
credible educators are willing to acknowledge different uncertainty, individual differences, and the limits of their expertise. They do not promise that, one diet, supplement, drug, or protocol will work for everything. That's, I think, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is falling into that trap that it's just one way.
Right. Right.
And the other thing is that I think social media should be the beginning of a health conversation, not the end of one.
Hmm.
So I would always tell people to use it to discover ideas and to ask better questions, but never to actually diagnose yourself or blindly copy someone else's treatment plan, right? The most important thing to remember is that the algorithm knows what captures your attention. It's geniusly built around that, but
Yes.
it does not know what is, medically appropriate for your body.
Totally.
That's what I say.
This is on such a less medical grade, but I actually had a meeting with a client, sort of a client readout earlier today. It's a skincare company,
Right.
and one of the things we were talking about exactly that is your clients or your customers are going to discover you
Yes.
on social, but where they're actually converting and retained is when there's a people interaction, whether that's an esthetician has told them something about the product, or they've been given a protocol by their med spa, or they have a friend who's like really passionate about the product. Like that's the retention piece. That's, as a brand, obviously what will turn views into revenue, which is ultimately always the goal.
100%, right? And so what I always say as well is like social media may be where the client discovers you, but the human experience is why they stay,
Yeah,
right? So I
yeah,
think that's such a beautiful campaign. Like you have a strong founder story or an influencer partnership can create that first moment of attention, but then, it can make someone very curious enough to book an appointment or to try and get a product, right? But once they
right.
enter into the clinic or interact with the brand, the algorithm is no longer doing the work, right? Because the retention comes down to whether the person actually feels seen, heard, and cared for, right? Did someone listen to my concerns? Who met me at the counter when I entered the door? Did they
Right.
explain the treatment honestly? Did they manage expectations rather than oversell me something?
Right.
And did that experience, because it's all about experience now, feel personal, or did the client feel like another transaction or a number,
Hmm.
right? When we're talking about healthcare.
Yeah, yeah. Or even some, there's always the like, is it too personalized? We were talking with
Yeah.
one clinic about like AI as a front desk, and it's like it is actually creepy if the agent suddenly is like, well, we know that you've used this product, this product, this, right? There's like that
Yeah,
that fine
exactly.
line.
It's a bit too much sometimes. Yeah.
If you're a brand, like what does authority actually look like operationally for a brand? Like, is it, that you're showing data? Is that there's the founder is the face of the brand? Like, how do you recommend companies think about that piece?
That's a great question. And I honestly think it's very niche for different brands.
Yeah.
And it comes down to, not just having, I would say, a credentialed person appear in a few videos, because it really means building expertise in a way that the company actually operates, right? So to me, it always comes down to taking a look at someone's missions, vision, and values. So yes, the founder may become the face of the brand, or the company may bring in those physicians, researchers, or other qualified expert, but authority has to go so much deeper than the spokesperson, right? It should
Yeah.
shape how products are developed, how claims are reviewed, and how the staff are actually trained, right? How client questions are answered, and how the company responds when the evidence is uncertain. Um, so for example, like I've worked with a company where we asked the question, like, does the brand have a real clinical or scientific review process
Right.
before any of the content goes live? And sometimes the answer is no, because they want clicks, or sometimes, we take it a step further and say like, okay, well, can the customer facing team explain not only what a treatment may do, but also who may not be a good candidate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Totally.
adverse outcomes and complaints treated as opportunities to improve the system, or simply as, public relations problems. So those are operational signs of authority.
Yeah. Yeah.
And consistency matters too, because a brand loses credibility when its educational content sounds responsible, but its advertising makes, exaggerated promises. And then the same standard of truth should exist across the clinic, right? Social media, the sales team, website
Yeah.
partnerships, and experience. So I think authority can begin with a credible face, but it becomes valuable when that expertise is embedded throughout the organization,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You don't want to look authoritative. It's really to make better decisions because qualified expert, is present there.
It's interesting. I was thinking about sort of that very thought of, this industry, I think, is riding the wave of like the Hubermans, the Atias, the Rogans. But obviously, you need, to differentiate yourself as a brand, whether you're a creatine product or, another product. Like, you also have
Yes.
to kind of create your own. You can't just ride the wave anymore, right? You have to create your own voice within that. Like, how are you seeing brands determine what their unique voices, or how would you recommend a brand understand what its unique voice is? Because again, I find that sort of the more you know who you're talking to, the better, even if it's this big, like the
Yeah.
better that will serve you initially.
Exactly. And I think that, there's nothing wrong with meeting consumers where the curiosity already exists, right? I
Yeah.
think that's where some of the non-reinvention of the wheel sort of comes into place. But the problem is when a brand's entire identity becomes, we offer the thing you heard about it on a podcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
It's like,
yeah, yeah.
that to me is something I call borrowed attention, right? It's not necessarily owned authority. And
Right.
eventually every clinic, selling the same peptide, the same test, the same supplement, or the longevity protocol, and everything just starts to sound identical.
Yeah.
And, in those situations, the brands that will endure are the ones that move beyond repeating the conversation and develop very much a clear point of view on their own. Like, what do
Yeah.
they really believe at the end of the day? Who are they best equipped to serve? What standards will they not compromise? And, how do they interpret the evidence differently or deliver a meaningfully, different better patient experience?
Yeah.
So you can ride that wave to become visible, but you cannot build long-term, enterprise value without that differentiation.
Right, right.
And a durable brand needs its own expert voice, always, its own educational platform, its own patient outcomes, and its own relationship with their own audience. So I
Hmm.
would tell brands that, use the cultural moment, but do not become dependent on it. You can let Rogan or whoever start the consumer's curiosity,
Yeah.
but your job is to earn the consumer's trust.
Yeah. We really do keep coming down to like those words of trust, credibility, consistency, that trust piece being so core. It's almost like, because we're in this world of, I think trust was always important, especially when someone is spending money, especially when it's related to their health and their body. But I do think that like as AI explodes and as social explodes, that trust piece and authenticity piece, I think is becoming much more relevant because it's harder. It's so hard to sift through everything we're being pushed on a daily basis.
100%. And I'll actually, if you want, I'll share a personal story of a
I would
surgery
love
that I
that. Yeah, yeah.
and something that I actually posted on social media today that has started to go viral. So years ago, I had lumps in my breast and I got them removed. And as a result, I had breast augmentation surgery because of the crazy asymmetry.
Yeah, yeah.
And I traveled back to Ontario, Toronto last week to get new breast augmentation surgery just to help with the symmetry and everything that was sort of as a result of, long-term trauma and so forth. But
Yeah.
what was really cool is that I met with my plastic surgeon several times before, and we decided, you know what, let's document this journey. It was going to help
Mm-hmm.
with his branding. He just started and opened a brand new, beautiful clinic. And, we decided, like, how are we going to make this unique? How are we going to get the users to help want to come into his clinic for the first time ever when there's
Right.
hundreds of other plastic surgery clinics out there? And maybe like what can I get out of this to show patient autonomy, to show, that female facing voice that we're going to be judged no matter what at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah,
Regardless,
yeah,
if we're
yeah,
too enhanced, we're not enhanced enough, too muscular, not
yeah. You might
muscular,
as well just do you
unpeptized,
because
not
they're going to judge
unpeptized.
you. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So we sat and we brainstormed that he is going to do the first ever publicly documented procedure where I'm put under local anesthetic, and he is actually going to put two different sized implants into my body, sew me up. I get to then get up, actually take a look at which one looks better.
Wow.
And then he is going to, again, this is all under local anesthetic, whereas
Yeah.
usually people are, under general anesthesia. And I'm going to take a look to see which one looks better. Everything's already sewn. I'm completely
Yeah.
cognizant of weight. And then we decided on which size looks better. And he actually cauterized to release the scar tissue and was moving it, and I could see it in real time.
Wow.
So this is something that has never been publicly documented. And all it took is for a patient, myself, to consent to it, to be something completely different and unique, and to work with the clinic for them to show what's unique. And
Right.
I think this is a perfect example of many clinics are not willing to take that risk. They're thinking, oh, if something happens with the patient, I don't want to
Hmm.
sign, these forms. What happens? Let's go through legal, and that's fine. And I know that a lot of the world is accustomed to, being
Right.
very risk averse, but all it takes is for someone to step outside the zone. And this video now that we've posted, about an hour ago has more than, 40,000 views on it. It's
Yeah.
probably going to hit 1 million by the end of the day,
I'll give it a
just
few.
because
I'll give it a few.
yeah, just because this is something that's never been done. And all it took is an additional 10-minute conversation as what can we do that's different from anyone else out there?
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you were to put, I think so many of our listeners are practice owners,
Yes.
oftentimes provider owners. And so, the lesson here, I think, is like take away the constraints of what
Yes.
you've been told to do or what you've done in the past or what you're seeing doing. And, like what would be fun to actually even do yourself. And then what would
Yeah,
you, if you were to put yourself in, your user's shoes, or reader's shoes, what
exactly.
would be
Be
catchy or
that
interesting?
reader. Yeah, exactly. And go through that client experience yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
obviously for surgery, you're not going to go through it yourself, but really position yourself, live in that moment, endure it with the patient.
Hmm.
It was the most incredible experience. And I'm actually very excited for you to watch it afterwards and let me
Yeah.
know your
Yeah.
responses to the real. But that's what we documented. And the message at the end of the day is we're going to be judged regardless of what we do in life.
Hmm.
And everyone has their own story to tell. And if you tell things truthfully and honestly, you will get the social media following if that's what a company decides to go through.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think in this case, what we find is, and I, by no means an expert, but we find that content that involves humans and people rather than, just stills or, words for that matter resonate
Absolutely.
more with audiences. And what I like about what you just shared is you are showing the trust that is being built between you and your provider because that
Ex-
is immense trust in both directions. And that's what you're
exactly.
featuring. It's really interesting, that level.
Yeah, for sure. And I will give a shout out to my provider, Dr. Ronan Avram, and the Appleby Clinic because they were just as willing, to give the most incredible patient experience, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all it takes is for a provider to say, you know what, like we go through medical school and we're always forced to pick the answer A, B, C, or D, right?
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
always those people that challenge and say, I want to pick E, that make
Yeah.
it somewhere in life, right?
Yeah.
That think outside of the box of something that's never been done before. And that's what working with Dr. Ronan Abram was like.
Yeah.
And, for me, the differentiation starts by taking away the constraints we place around the conversation and genuinely putting ourselves in someone else's shoes,
Yeah.
right? A lot of brands communicate from the inside out. Here's our service, here's our technology, here's why we are better. But the person on the other side may be thinking, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to
Hmm.
believe. I'm
Hmm.
afraid of making the wrong decision. I just want someone to understand what I'm going through. And when you remove the industry language, the marketing agenda, and the pressure to, imitate whatever is trending, you can ask much better question, right? Like, what does this
Yeah.
person actually need from us right now?
Yeah.
And another very interesting example is that, I was working with a company that was developing essentially these headphones for children that they can listen to while going through MRI machines, right? To kind
Oh.
of distract them.
Yeah.
And but and they spent years and millions of dollars developing these headphones. And I'm not going to say the company name because I'll get canceled, but and they thought this is amazing. Like they can watch movies, they can listen to any sound they want. And what they were missing was testing it with a child
Oh
client, with
man.
the youth.
Yeah.
Every single time they tested, the child essentially ripped them off. They already felt so claustrophobic in this MRI
Oh.
machine that I don't want anything else. And they spent millions of dollars. And the one biggest mistake that they made was never actually testing it on a
Wow.
child.
Wow. I
Yeah.
I that is like preaching to my choir because one of the things I say all the time, and this is a lesson I went to Stanford, and one of like entrepreneurship is a huge part of the curriculum there. And while I attempted to avoid most of those classes,
Yeah.
one of the core pillars that always stuck with me is that you can't go to a solution before you really know the problem. And
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that folks, oftentimes, like this was a proposed solution to a problem statement, but they skipped really knowing what the problem is, which is that the kid feels like
Okay.
really trapped and sort of internalized. And this is a solution that doesn't work. And so it's
Exactly.
just, while we think we know what's best for other people, we actually really just need to ask them, and even if they're kids, because kids are actually pretty smart too.
Yeah, oh, for sure, right? And it's, for me, the real innovation often begins with empathy, right? Removing your own
Yeah.
assumptions, stepping into the consumer's experience and building from there. And I think you said that very well in terms of skipping the problem statement, right? One of the biggest mistakes brands make is skipping the problem statement and going
Yeah.
straight to the solution, right? They lead with, again, here's our treatment, right? Before actually understand what the person is struggling with. And
Yeah.
when you skip that steps, so a few things always happen. So first, the consumer may not recognize themselves in the message.
Mhm.
And second, the brand starts sounding interchangeable with every other competitor offering with a similar service.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, I always think that you risk solving the wrong problem entirely, right? And you're in a financial hole at that point. But, someone asking you about weight loss may not simply want to lose 20 pounds. They
Yeah.
may want to feel comfortable in a room again, right?
Yeah.
Regaining control after years of frustration or understanding why their previous efforts failed,
Yeah.
right? Like a skincare client that we sort of talked about may not just be asking for cleaner skin, they may be asking to actually feel confident without makeup, right? And those are very
Right.
different conversations.
Really
So,
different.
yeah, and I think the problem statement, so it focuses us to slow down, remove our assumptions, and really put ourselves in the other person's shoes, right? It changes how we communicate, how we
Yeah.
design the experience, and sometimes even what the solution we recommended.
And then yes, absolutely. And then keep doing it. Right. Like I was talking to someone was on the podcast, Kurt Glober, who is CEO of Glow Skincare, was on the podcast, and he was sharing how much he talks to his customers. And it's like
Yeah.
every single week he's talking to customers, plural. And it
Yes.
wasn't just in product development and product innovation when they were coming up with their concept. Like he continues to do that because guess what? People evolve, their needs evolve. His client, the fearlessly visible woman or whatever, their sort of target market, she's changing. And so keeping that ear to the ground too.
100%, right? We evolve on a daily and weekly basis. This is why with a lot of the programs that I develop for individuals, it's not a one-time fit all, right? We hop on weekly webinars, we hop on everyone is changing, right? And that's why, some of the strongest brands speak directly with customers, like we mentioned, every single week.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a problem statement is also, sort of linking back to that, is not something that you write once in a strategy meeting and then treat it as permanent, right?
Right.
People's
Right.
like their concerns change as they learn more, as new treatments emerge, the economy shifts, and as their experience with the brand develops. So the person who arrives may first be asking, will this work for me? But a month later, they may be asking, okay, can I now sustain this?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
later still, the real question may become, do I feel understood and supported here? And if you are not continually listening, you
Right.
may keep answering the question the customer used to have,
Yeah.
right? So I think those the conversations also reveal things that data alone just can't, right? Analytics can tell
Totally.
you when someone clicked or when they stopped engaging, but a conversation can tell you why.
Yeah. Yeah.
And was the message confusing? Did that person feel judged? Was the process too complicated? The solution no longer fit their life. So, customer listening should not be treated as occasional market research, but rather
Yeah.
I always like to think of it as like this, operational rhythm essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you listen to your customer, like your social customer? Is that, obviously you're tracking engagement and comments and all of those things, but are you soliciting feedback from your users? I'm just so curious.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I do, and I try to my best. So, when you get to a certain level, especially with social media,
Yeah.
you'll get, your regular DMs from your friends, your acquaintances, people that you follow or have in your circle.
Right.
But then you'll also have a ton of message requests, right? And I do really try to make an effort to go through some of those personalized hidden messages because it's like there's a lot, right? Some weeks it can be
Right.
more than 1,000. Some weeks it's just not sustainable to manage on your own. But I really do try to make an effort, especially those that really have, shared experiences or lived messages that very much resonate. But I listen to customers by creating that space for them to tell me what they actually need, right? Not just what I expect them to hear from the content that I
Mm-hmm.
post. And that starts with asking better questions. So instead of, did you like something that I post? I would ask, what almost stopped you from moving forward? Or maybe what confused you in something? Or what were you hoping, would change? Or what would make this experience feel more personal for you? And I think it's taking those additional, even seconds to
Yeah.
moments really, really make a difference for someone. And I also pay attention to the questions people repeat, right? So what am I seeing repeated in my comments, the direct messages, and then will maybe make a post about that, right? It's just repeated patterns, any objections, or when the same concern appears repeatedly, like that is not noise. It's a signal that the brand may be failing to explain
Yep.
something clearly or address an important need.
Yeah. Totally.
And I think, listening also requires some sort of restraint, right? Like you can't be planning your response while the customer is still speaking, right? You have to be willing to hear that the experience you intended to create may
Mm-hmm.
not be an experience that they actually had, right? So there's a lot that goes into it, but I think that I try and do my absolute best in
Yeah.
addressing, or at least I'll sort of group things into themes and then try and address it in a post or a story or a Q&A session, those types of venues.
Yeah, yeah. That last line is resonating with me where um, listening is not hearing.
Mhm.
Like if
Yeah.
you are going to take the time to go through those comments, you can disagree, right? Like you can take feedback and decide, I'm actually not going to incorporate that feedback and just sort of put it aside.
Yeah.
But there has to be an openness to change, right? There really has
Oh,
to be an openness, or else you might as well save yourself the time.
exactly. And I think with that is like it's the continuous operating habit of, ask, observe, reflect,
Mm-hmm.
act, and then ask again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when we think about hearing to me feels very passive, right? Like you register the words that are coming in, but listening is what requires that curiosity. So
Yeah.
it means paying attention to what people are actually saying, what they're not saying, and what may be underneath the question, right? So let's say a consumer may say like, okay, this is too expensive, but like the real concern may be I don't understand the value,
Right.
or I'm
Right.
afraid that I'll invest and be disappointed again. So someone may ask for a specific treatment, but what they're really seeking is, maybe it's the confidence, maybe it's the reassurance or a sense of control.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
me, it's the real listening means resisting the urge to immediately defend, right? Sell
Yeah.
or solve. I
Yeah.
think that's what we see on social media. But it could mean just asking, tell me more and being willing to discover that your original assumption was just wrong and being okay to accept that.
The framework defend, like, checking your impulse to defend, sell, or solve.
Yeah.
I love that for our
Yeah.
listeners. I also imagine it would help everyone's romantic relationships.
Yeah. 100%,
It's just a
right? Like,
principle of life. Yeah.
yeah, like I always think of like in hearing, you're just collecting a bunch of words, right? But
Hmm.
listening, that's what creates the understanding. And understanding is what allows a brand to serve people better, right? And it's same with relationships, right?
Yeah.
Like you can just sit on the couch and say, sure, dear, yes, honey,
Yeah.
right? But what does that mean for your relationship? Like, how are you building?
Yeah.
Um, and something actually, I will share that my husband shared with me. It was a meme not too long ago. I think it was a couple weeks ago that he said this. It's you fall in love with a person, let's say when you're 20 years old, but when you're 30, you're a completely different person.
Yeah.
When you're 40, you're a completely different person. And that's where a lot of divorces happen.
Yeah.
But what you have to do is you have to fall in love all over again with a completely new
Yeah.
person, essentially.
Yeah.
And I love that because I always tell brands to do the same thing. They need to re-fall in love with their audience and find new values, find new ways of giving back, and continue to work with them to solve different problems, right?
Yeah.
You have to keep up with the market trends. You have to keep up with what's going on in the world. And who we were when we were 20 versus 30 versus 40, 50, however old
Yeah.
you are, is never going to be the exact same. So
Right.
that applies to relationships, that applies to businesses, is you have to continue to evolve and you have to continue to fall in love with that consumer.
That framing is so unique and I think so differentiated, Nicole. Of I think it's so easy as a brand to try to think about how your consumer can fall in love with you.
Yes,
But
exactly.
you being obsessed with your consumer and your customer, I think like that's the trust and credibility piece that we keep coming back to, is like that genuine care. I really love the way that you reframe the narrative and sort of put it back on the brand to internalize.
Exactly, exactly. And it's both ways, right? It's how does the brand fall in love with the consumer and it's how does the consumer fall in love with the
Yeah,
company's
yeah,
brand.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
both ways,
Because it has to
100%.
be like for it to be an enduring relationship, it has to be a mutual care.
Has to be
You know,
exactly.
yeah. And I do like another thing wrote down was the specificity of questions when you're soliciting feedback. It's actually something that we learned in like a leadership coaching course that I took, where if you're talking to a direct report and you say, do you have any feedback for me? And this is probably
Right.
something I like, my listeners are like, okay, Eddie, do you actually do that? Instead of saying, do you have any feedback for me? Saying, what could I have done better in that last meeting? Right?
Yes.
It's specific, so it's less scary, and it's suddenly someone's opted in already versus having to opt in of their own volition, because you've already said that they're giving you feedback. It's just a matter of what kind. And I
Yeah,
heard that earlier with your questioning.
exactly. And I think I love that. Like the specificity of a question determines, I think, the quality that you're getting
Yeah.
of feedback, right? So when we ask, did you like it? We usually get, yeah, it was good, right? Did you like that pizza? Yeah, it was good. The
Yeah.
answer is polite, but it's almost useless, right? Like it does not tell us what worked, what created hesitation, or what needs to change, right? So instead, like it's really about anchoring questions to a specific moment. It could be a decision. I might ask a question, at what point did you feel most confident moving forward? Or was there anything in the consultation that made you hesitate?
Mm-hmm.
Or what did you expect to happen that did not happen, right? I think that those questions really invite the person to describe an experience rather than give the answer they think the company wants to hear, right? It forces you to think a little bit more outside the box of things. And I think
Yeah.
brands should ask about behavior, right? Not just about opinion. Someone may say the
Mm.
experience was excellent, but then never return, right? So then I
Yeah.
would ask, well, what would make you book again? What might prevent you from recommending us, right? Or when you explain the experience to someone else, what did they say, right? Their
Yeah.
behavior language often reveals more than the satisfaction score. And to be honest, a lot of brands that I work with are scared to ask those questions because they're like, well, I don't want to,
Mm,
have a bad
mm-hmm,
report if there's anything, but then how are you going to improve? And
right.
how are you going to get, like, timing matters with a lot of it, right? Feedback immediately after an appointment tells you how the interaction felt,
Yeah.
but feedback several weeks later tells you whether expectations were actually met, right?
Yeah.
Whether the outcome lasted and whether the customer still feels supported. So I think that those are massive, massive differentiating factors, right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily come from asking more questions, but it comes from asking more precise questions at the right moment.
Right. Right. And, and to your point, behavior. I haven't thought that's such a great way of putting it that I hadn't thought about that framework because I think we all know that self-report is false. Like it's sort of like memory. Like we just can't rely on that for even like legal trials anymore. And so to your
Yes.
point, did you like the brand? Sure. Did you buy the brand? Whole different issue. I love a lot of brands that to be honest, I could sort of leave, give or take, whatever that phrase is, take or leave.
Right.
Yeah. Um,
Exactly.
how how do you think about, if I'm a brand, how should I think about the right time or when it's appropriate or not to work with an outside influencer versus try to kind of develop those expert voices in-house as a company?
That's a great question. And I think I get that question a lot is,
Yeah.
Enhanced Games was one example, right? They flew in like 200 different social media influencers, which was crazy. And, really they just wanted to create as much hype of the event as
Mm-hmm.
possible. And for me in working with different brands and being a social media influencer, I think the right time to work with an influencer is after you understand the problem you are solving,
Mm-hmm.
not when you're still hoping the influencer will figure that out for you, if that makes sense. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think an influencer can really help to amplify a clear message, but they can't necessarily, come in and repair an unclear offer, right? Or a weak customer experience or a product that has
Mm-hmm.
never earned trust. So if the business cannot explain who it serves from the beginning, what that person needs, or why its solution is meaningfully different, then more attention may simply expose those weaknesses faster.
Yeah.
And the brand also needs to know what it wants from the partnership, right? Is it goal awareness? Is it education? Is it credibility? Is it leads, direct sales, or long-term brand building? Because those are all completely different objectives and
Mm-hmm.
they require readers and different content, right? So
Mm-hmm.
then there's also the piece about alignment that I always talk about. So I would look beyond a follower count and ask, does this person already speak to the consumer we serve?
Right.
Do they trust their judgment? Does their tone match our values? Or, can they explain the subject reasonably?
Yeah.
In in healthcare and wellness, the wrong influencer can actually generate, attention while very quietly damaging credibility.
Right.
So the company also has to be ready operationally because, you know, they have to be ready to and prepared to answer like what happens after someone clicks, right? Is the website even clear? Can the team handle the inquiries that may come in afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
Is the consultation experience strong? Are the expectations managed, honestly? Because the influencer may help acquire the customer, but the brand still has to retain them through the human interaction, right? So
Yeah.
how set up can we be on the back end to make sure this is as successful as possible?
Yeah. And to your first point, which is so spot on, an influencer strategy is not a business strategy. Like
Exactly.
you have to know like your core business and, like problem statement, you've proven out product market fit, i.e. your solution, proposed solution works. And that's when it's time to bring on a voice like yours to amplify rather than
Exactly.
determine in the first place what that might be.
Yeah, work with someone when you have something you want to amplify. That's worth it, right? And you have a clear reason for the partnership and you have that experience that's capable of fulfilling a promise, right? I wouldn't say hire an influencer to manufacture trust that
Right.
the business has not yet earned. I think
Right.
that's one of the biggest takeaways as well.
Nicole, I'm learning so much today. This
Oh,
is
I
such
love
a
it.
great conversation. I have like so many sound bites I'm going to take home with me today, and I could
I
talk
love
to
that.
you for much longer. But just in
Yeah,
light of time, I thought maybe we could end with just a few kind of quote unquote like rapid fire questions, if you will.
sure. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
The first one is, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about influencer-driven healthcare marketing?
Hmm, that's a good question. So I think the biggest misconception is that the social influencer itself has to have tried the product and that it's the same as reach. Like the biggest misconception I think that is that, influence is the same thing as people actually getting a certain reach. So a person can have millions of followers and still have very little ability to change behavior, right?
Yeah.
They may generate views but not trust qualified customers or having that sort of long-term value. So I think, conversely, a smaller creator with a highly engaged audience may have far more actual influence because people believe them and act on what they say.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And as you are looking ahead, what are you most excited about in as an influencer? What are, a trend or an idea or, a tailwind that you're seeing?
I honestly, for me, the excitement comes from generating content and looking to my audience to see what it is that they want to know more information about. I love when I work with companies and individuals that actually allow creativity versus, getting sort of very stringent and narrow focused, sort of objectives, which is fine. You're meeting the
Right,
goals of the
right.
company, sort of staying aligned with the brand. But I think where it differs is you bring an idea forward and it's like, no, because we've never done it that way, right? And
Yeah.
tradition sometimes kills, right? It's that complacency, always doing something the same. But the best part about it, then you'll have people at the end of the day saying, we're not growing, we're in a financial hole or so forth. It's like, well, what have you changed? One of my favorite quotes of all time is if you always did what you always do, you'll always get what you always got, right? So for
Mm,
me, the most exciting part of my journey in social media influence is just continuing to do things that are unique, that haven't been done before. And when we actually analyze a lot of the data, I always go think by the 3 second rule. Every 3 seconds, our attention span changes. That is just
yeah,
the new generation of social media influence. So when you're
totally.
making a reel on social media, for example, every 3 seconds something needs to change. A song, a position, a caption on the text, a new
Mm,
environment behind you. 3 seconds, and typically that's when we see the dip, when we see view and engagements because something hasn't changed, which is
yeah.
crazy.
I'm gonna with my team. I preach the same in terms of
Yeah.
slides. I'm like, you have like a second to capture someone, or else they're going to totally disengage. But I love that the 3 second rule where there's
Yeah.
something
So
that
what are
has
you
to
doing?
shift.
Yeah. 3 second, 6 second, 9 second, 12 second. And then after that, if you capture someone's attention, they're more willing to stay on. But you will see dips at 3 second mark, someone goes, 6 second mark, someone goes. So that's where you sort of try to, something has to change.
Yeah, what you're describing, the framework you're describing is, I think that folks don't often, myself probably included, think about your engagement with your social media followers the way that offline brands think about retention, right? Because we
Yeah.
think about, in a med spa, for example, we think about patient acquisition. We think about, if you then convert to another appointment and another, if you do three appointments in a row, you're likely to have that patient for a long time. But what you're
Right.
saying is, I think folks maybe forget to bring that exact same framework to their social media presence. How am I bringing
Yes.
folks in the door? How am I retaining them? What are those trends in the data that show if they engage with me 3 times that we built that trust? I really love how you're really using that. You're bringing strategy mind, obviously, to the work that you do. And it's really great to understand more about it.
And I love the way that you said it because in social media, brands often abandon that framework where sometimes like they almost focus entirely on gaining followers, right? Reaching new people or
Yeah.
getting one viral post. And then they wonder like why the audience does not convert, return, or develop any sort of real loyalty, right? And a follower should be thought of as someone who's entering into a relationship with a brand. That's always what I
Yes.
like to say. Like,
Yeah.
what happens after they discover you? Do they continue to follow your engagement strategies, right? Like retention on social media means giving people a reason to come back.
Yeah.
They could it could be consistency, useful education, some sort of recognizable point of view, access to real expertise, or simply making them feel understood, right?
Yeah.
And like I always think coming back to brands, it's don't just ask, how do we attract more people? Ask, why would someone who found us today still trust us a year from now? That's one of the questions I always ask.
Yeah. There's so much wisdom here, which I
Ah,
think leads me to my final question, which is, what is a post or a piece of content or an interaction that you're incredibly proud of?
Oh, that is a good question. I think to me, the ones that I'm most proud of is ones that I can truly be myself. And it's not a paid collaboration.
Hmm.
It's something that is so genuine and authentic coming from myself that naturally does super well. Like
Yeah,
you'll get the ones that it's like, you can easily go viral because you make it a little bit comedic or you make it controversial. But when you
right.
add that twist in there where it's like, this is really me and I'm speaking to myself and wow, I'm seeing a huge engagement for this.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's the authenticity. It's being yourself and understanding and remembering that at the end of the day, you are going to be judged no matter what you do. If you
Hmm.
have a million followers, 30% of those people are still going to judge you at the end of the day. If you have, X amount, like you'll always get different perspectives, no matter
Yeah.
who you are in the world and no
Yeah.
matter what you put out there. So people have to remember that whatever they're posting on social media, you're going to have people that hate it and you're going to have people that love it.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, authenticity is what shines through. And to me, the proudest moments are when I can be authentic and generate a good product.
Yeah. And also lead to better outcomes for people, right? I think it
Exactly.
sounds like the post
Yeah,
from today is one of the posts that you're proud of because you're showing the patient that there's another option for them as they decide what's best for their body.
exactly.
And it's a really
100%.
exciting thing.
Yeah, and it's never been documented before. So it is very cool that it's the first ever.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Well, with
thank you.
with that, Nicole, just a delight and a treat to have you on board. Our audience is going to learn so much just about the fact. I mean, I think folks often think that social media is not as quote maybe serious, but the amount of sort of care and intention that people who are successful like you, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. So thank you for letting us peek behind the curtain a little bit to see how you make the magic that you do.
Oh, I so appreciate that, Annie. And it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. And, I'll be very much looking forward to continuing the conversation offline with you as well.
Likewise.